Welcome to the Compost Pile, a podcast where we break down gardening, homesteading, and more. Join your hosts, David Poole and Aaron Barnhill, as they pile up information and break it down so that you can be more successful in the garden.
Hey, David, it's good to be back.
Yeah, man, it's been a little while.
It's been a few weeks. I think I almost died, but I'm happy to be back here on the Compost Pile, your podcast for all things gardening and homesteading. And what are we going to talk about today?
I think we're going to talk a little bit about just seeds. The first week where I winged it while you were gone.
Oh, okay, yeah. What'd you do while I was gone?
I made a short little snippet about just seed starting.
Okay.
But I think we could talk a little bit more in depth about like seeds and.
See, what you were missing is when I was gone is you didn't have anybody ask you questions.
Yeah.
So you did a seed episode, but without me asking you the questions, it wasn't full and well-rounded, right?
It was awkward.
So what we'll do is we'll give you the full seed breakdown, right?
Yeah.
I guess, or the best we can. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. I ask you a couple questions. Does every plant have a seed?
Actually, no.
No. Okay. I'm trying to think of anything because I feel like almost everything eventually makes a seed. We had an onion episode. We've had all these other things where we talk about there's multi-year crops.
Right.
And we plant things in a lot of different ways. Like obviously, usually the main way you plant onions is by going in the little bunching. And you'll probably never see an onion seed.
You can buy them,
but I know that they make seeds.
You can buy them. They're a pain, so a lot of people don't want to deal with them. They're so small. It's a lot more work to get them going. So some things people don't really ever start by seed, like not as like the masses. So you're not as familiar with it. But interestingly enough, things like ferns.
Okay.
Ferns reproduce by spores, like microscopic spores.
That's wild, like a mushroom.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting enough. Like it makes you wonder: is it related to fungi? I don't know, but it's
that makes sense though because ferns, if we're talking like evolutionarily, are so old, right?
Yeah.
Ferns are in the fossil record when there was like hardly anything on land, so that does make sense that they never developed.
They also kind of, to me, if you think about it, they might grow in some of the same conditions, like more damp, humid conditions.
Right, that's true. Yeah,
where fungi would thrive. So that's kind of interesting.
That's true, and ferns are really kind of prolific where they grow and they're natural, right? So if you're in an old growth forest under that canopy, they're super prolific, and I've never seen a fern seed, so that makes sense. I just never thought about it until now.
They're dropping invisible spores.
I guess so, but really seeds can be so different, right? It's a huge world of seeds out there. We have everything from, I was talking about a dandelion before we started this and how small that is. You blow the dandelion and it has a little tiny seed at the end of it. An acorn is the same way. It's got a little tiny seed at the end of that, and they're meant to catch the wind and fly. And then on the opposite of that, we have like an avocado pit, and it's humongous.
Much larger.
And it's a seed too. We call it a pit. Stone fruit like peach, we call it a pit, but it's a seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all different shapes, sizes. Some of them much easier to plant than others. So it's a very unique thing. You think about just the differences from just say like a mustard seed, super tiny, to a bean or a pea seed, which is kind of interesting. Do you think though the mustard plant grows bigger than a lot of the bean or pea plants that are going to be smaller, more compact, but the seed's bigger, so it's interesting.
I've seen a lot of different types of mustard seeds,
Yeah.
even too. There's probably a lot of different cultivars of that. I don't know. I've never grown a mustard plant, though.
I always think it's very interesting, like certain types of plants. Like, a green bean seed looks pretty much like a green bean seed. There's not, like, color-wise, like size might be slightly different, but the shape, they're all kind of the same. When you look at most like green crops, broccoli, cauliflower, mustard, collards, kale, the seeds all look exactly the same.
Yeah.
So it's
you said a bunch of plants that are all the same.
Well, yeah, they're from
broccoli, cauliflower, kale. Those are all the same plant.
They're all from the same family of plants. Right. So it makes sense But it's just very interesting, that there's really not that much difference between some of those things. I guess
Yeah.
you could easily mix them up.
Yeah, and one thing that I struggle with myself because I'm not the most organized person, I'm pretty chaotic, is like seed storage and organization. And if you went to my garage, you would laugh because I have like a lot of my things that I've let go to seed, and I try to keep them. They're in like different manila envelopes with Sharpies on it. I have a whole rack of seeds that I purchased that are still in their little envelopes. I'm seed rich, and that's just one of the, I guess that's my like ADHD trait, is that I'm just like super seed rich. What is it that seeds really like, what do they need to store in? I mean, do I need anything special to store seed?
No, not particularly. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like somewhere with, ideally somewhere that's going to have a consistent temperature.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Okay.
a cooler temperature. Like most things, when you're storing long term, you want a cooler, consistent temperature. You need something that's going to be breathable.
Mhm.
If you trap something in, say, like a Ziploc bag, and
You mean like humidity and
yeah,
moisture?
moisture's in there, and you don't get it out, then that seed could mold.
Yeah.
You could possibly
Will
go
it
as
will a
far.
seed still grow if it's molded?
It might.
It might, yeah.
I
Hmm.
mean, it depends on the type of seed and maybe the
Hmm.
resilience of it. Um, I've had times where I've seen like a lot of kids will sprout like beans in
The
a
lima
bag. Yeah,
bean,
lima
yeah,
bean.
lima bean.
For educational purposes, and like a lot of times those will get like mold on them just
Yeah,
because there's too much moisture in there. But it still grows for a good while. If you were to
right.
take it out and maybe let it dry, it might be okay. You never know.
Yeah, I remember doing that. That's kind of one of those like American education core memories. I don't know if you had the same one as
It's
me, but I think in first grade, you take the lima bean, you put it in a damp
Yep.
like paper towel napkin, put it in a Ziploc, put it in the window of your classroom, and just kind of wait for it to grow.
It's interesting enough that topic has come up. We just donated a bunch of seeds to the Giving Field
Okay.
at St. Anne's in Beaumont. They're
Yeah,
doing an
yeah.
activity for a community-wide event, doing that exact activity
It's timeless,
for
man. This
kids.
yeah.
It's cool. It's important. It's teaches you a lot about the needs of a plant and
Yeah.
getting started.
It's really fundamental, and it's a core memory. Speaking on that, and we're kind of talking about how seeds are all super different. Does that play out in the ways that we get them to sprout and germinate?
Can you clarify your question?
So essentially, here's what I'm saying. I struggle with germinating certain things,
Okay.
and I've found tricks to different seeds, and I'm just wondering if there's a universal secret to germination. Uh, Typically, because I've never been able to successfully germinate an avocado pit, right? But I've never been unsuccessful in germinating basil.
I think overall you've got your three kind of universal things that all plants need. That we've talked about it many times before. You have water, you have temperature, and you have light. While not a lot of seeds need light to germinate, like lettuce being one that needs light to germinate,
Yeah.
but you need to have proper lighting right out of the gate to have a strong seedling. But more importantly, you need the right temperature and the right moisture content. And so when we started doing seed starting this year and doing workshops and such, I thought back to um, my failures last year here in this particular spot we're in right now. I started seeds, did all the things that I've known and done, and the temperature variable was uncontrollable in here. It was cold
It was
outside.
winter, right?
It was
Yeah.
winter time, and while I thought it was warm enough in here, this old house has really really thin floors, and that cold air coming up from the bottom and underneath the house was just enough to keep the seedlings from germinating.
Really? Wow. Okay.
So
And if they don't germinate in time, they're kind of sitting in moist soil,
yeah,
then
and then
they'll develop
can
a
lead to
fungus or
and rot.
anything else. Yeah, rot.
So you kind of have to understand the location where you're going to start and think about consistent temperature, warm temperatures, Because most of your seeds, they're going to want like a lot of them are going to take like 75, 85,
Mm-hmm.
90 degrees to germinate.
Is that why
Eh,
people put like heating pads
Yeah.
under their seed trays and
So that's
stuff?
how we
Yeah.
rectified our problem here. What we did is we put a heat mat.
Mm-hmm.
They're very inexpensive to get, and you can buy them now, or you can chain them together. So if
Oh,
you
cool,
have
cool.
a shelf or something, you can have them on multi-shelf. So that's kind of we ended up creating or getting a
Yeah, I
shelf.
passed it when I
Yeah.
came in here. It looks really nice. Yeah, and it's also like really amazing how many seeds you have going and germinating in such a small
Yeah.
spot
And
too.
that heat mat was the key thing for getting those to germinate, where a lot of people, they'll get spotty germination.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it comes down to temperature. And secondly, it's going to come down to moisture.
Right.
And one of the ways that we fixed that this season is we put a solid tray on the bottom, and every seed tray should have good drainage. So we're watering from the bottom. We're not
Oh,
misting.
okay.
So all the seedlings in that you saw in there,
Yeah.
I never used a humidity dome on there. My tray didn't fit a humidity dome, so I know I was gonna have to water more and keep that moisture content
Because you have
consistent.
heat underneath, right?
But
Yeah. So
basically, what I do is I'd flood the tray with water, and crazy enough, I could pour 1 to 2 quarts into that tray at a time, and within 5 minutes, the tray was completely empty again. But you could see the color change in the cells, wicking up, holding the moisture,
yeah.
and whenever before we added more seeds to that tray, we had I think a 95% germination rate out of
Yeah,
everything I
it's
planted.
full. I don't see any empty cells.
So I went from 0% last year to 95% just by controlling those variables.
And mainly temperature, right?
Yeah,
Is what you're
temperature.
saying, and that kind of speaks to what a seed's job is in nature, right? A
Yeah.
seed, a flower or a vegetable or whatever we're talking about, vegetation will bear fruit and produce a seed at the end of its growing cycle, right?
Yep.
Usually, typically in fall for most of these things, and then they dry up and fall over or become detached from the plant in some way, and then over the winter they find themselves in the soil usually,
Yep,
right?
they can lay dormant.
Yeah, and they lay dormant, and then it's usually the environmental temperature that tells them to wake up, right? Do I have that right?
And that's kind of what makes the difference. When we look at it from a little bit different perspective, let's use like the not so favorite topic like grass,
Sure.
and weeds and unwanted plants in a location, you know, that's why you get a totally different set of weeds that will grow in the fall and
Yeah.
into the winter as you will in the spring. So all those things that grew in the cool, they're dropping as the temperatures warm, seeds and flowering. And then all those things that lay dormant over the winter are now going to germinate.
Yeah.
So you have these cross points at your season changes, which is where you get most germination. And if you think about that, that's when a lot of times we're starting seeds are during those same points.
Sure. This is a little bit of a sidebar here, but I was going to ask you a question now that you got me going. There is this one plant that I have in my yard that it's got to be native. It's like a volunteer. It almost looks a little ornamental. It looks like a false fern, right? It has kind of a thin woody stem, and it has like a bilateral symmetry, and it's flat, right? Like a fern, and it kind of curls out. It is the most prolific seed dropper I've ever
Yeah.
experienced in my life, because every one of the little, it's not a fern, but I don't have any other language to use it, but every one of the little fern leaves or nettles like drops off and makes a seed, and I can't get rid of them. I don't really manicure my lawn. I just pull them up, and it's probably never going to go away because I have to think about how many seeds are just in the
Yeah.
soil. Like, I don't know what it's going to take to get rid of it. Maybe I'd have to burn my entire yard down. But
You think back to the very conversation on this podcast that we ever had about soil. Lots of things will grow in locations where there are deficiencies in the
Yeah,
soil. So
yeah.
sometimes they're growing because the conditions are right for that specific plant to be growing there, whether it be moisture, temperature, nutrients. So it's interesting. Sometimes a lot of those problems are fixed just by nutrient corrections or
Sure, yeah.
maybe amendments to the soil.
maybe changing the soil to where that one seed won't ever germinate,
Yeah,
right?
you make changes, and that may not be able to survive or be as prolific, and over time it goes away naturally. So, seeds and things grow in locations where the conditions are right.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the most interesting things that my friend Luis Chamorro from Texas Native Landscape Supply and Austin Wood Recycling, he taught me was like something as simple as the common dandelion grows in a calcium deficient soil. So,
Okay. Yeah.
so just interesting enough. It just goes to show you that things that we see all the time, all throughout nature, may be growing because a specific condition exists. So it's really important, that native seeds grow in places where those conditions
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, this thing, and again, I don't know if the description jogs your mind about what kind of plant it is, but it's so prolific that it gets into all of my pots and everything like that too.
Okay.
If something isn't taller than say 2 foot in my yard, it will probably get one of those little suckers growing out of it. It's so strange.
I bet I know what you're talking
You
about.
probably do.
but-
You could probably
yeah.
show me. We can show me later.
Yeah.
But we'll get back to topic. Like I said, that was a sidebar. But seeds, what seeds are is they carry the genetic information of a plant, right? So one thing that I like to do is I like to keep my own seeds a lot of times instead of just buying new seeds every year, because I saw you have some growing in your what's the word I'm looking for?
I'm just gonna call it.
What would you call that?
I'm gonna call it like a little mini greenhouse. in a
Your mini
sense.
greenhouse up at the front, your display.
Yeah.
I saw you have some Scotch bonnets growing,
Yeah.
right? I grew some Scotch bonnets 2 years ago, right? I got some Scotch bonnets at HEB, right? They come in a little plastic little container.
Yeah.
It's about $5 for them. I wanted to make some jerk chicken, and I saved 2 of those things, and I dried them out because I know how to germinate. I know how to save these seeds, and then I took the seeds out, waited all winter and germinate them. And those suckers are super hardy. They're super great for our zone 9.
Yeah.
And they work. And every year since, I've kept those seeds, because I want whatever that genetics is.
So I think it's important to always remember too, like, you have to know your variety if you're going to save those seeds, because not every seed can be saved to get a clone of the parent plant.
Right.
So Scotch bonnet, or you need to make sure you're saving heirloom varieties.
Yeah. So you mean
Or open pollinated
So you mean once I
varieties.
plant that seed and the plant grows up over the season, will cross pollinate and make a new seed?
No, like, so, you have varieties that have been around for a really long time.
Yeah.
Open pollinated or heirloom varieties, and when they produce a seed and you replant it, you're going to get a true replica of
Okay.
of that
Okay. I see.
specific plant. Whereas if we look at what are very, very commonly used, especially like if we were growing tomatoes, they're more commonly used because they're more suited to the environment and the conditions that we have right here. You have your hybridized seeds, and hybridized seeds are essentially, you have 2 open pollinated or heirloom type varieties, and they are basically cross pollinated
Okay.
by man. So it's not a natural process, but they're mimicking the natural process that would happen in nature. But it takes a really long time
But
for a new open
but it's
pollinated
an
variety
abomination is
to
what you're
naturally
saying.
happen. So one that we sell, and sometimes people think that I'm full of it, but there's a particular cucumber that we sell at Big County Feed. It's called the Tasty Green Burpless Cucumber.
Okay. Yeah.
Grows a slender burpless cucumber, 18 to 20 inches long, and that's most of my clients. That's their go-to. They want them.
Really?
I
Okay.
can't buy them from my growers. None of them grow that specific variety, so we start our own seeds, and we typically handle most of our own production of that one crop.
So
But-
you're producing your own seeds here too?
well, we buy them, but
Okay,
my
okay.
point being is, like, those hybridized seeds, we have to get them from somebody who imports them in. They're
Okay.
grown, I believe, in Japan, and they're hand pollinated, cross pollinated these seeds, and a 1 pound package at a wholesale cost is upwards of $500.
What?
They-
like
So,
1 pound of seeds.
1 pound of seeds.
Okay.
So we sell them in packets of like 15 or 30
Sure.
seeds, because we're or the slicing cucumber, the pickling, or the old straight eight being a favorite. You
Yeah.
could buy a tablespoon which has 300 seeds in it for a dollar.
Right,
You
right, right.
know,
Yeah.
that same scoop of these hybridized seeds might be $20. They're crazy expensive,
Yeah.
and that's because you have to think about all the work that's happening every year to produce these hybridized seeds by cross pollinating, and they're doing this so that they're getting the
Mm-hmm.
good traits out of two really good varieties.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you think about tomatoes, you may be getting disease resistance, like blight resistance. You might be getting
That's
nematode resistance, or a variety that withstands more warm temperatures.
if you're trying to grow tomatoes, you need like an everything resistant,
Yeah,
right? Because it's hard. It's terrible,
that's
especially here.
the episode that we had that drops or dropped before this one
Yeah.
with our friend Paul Lemoyne. We talked about tomatoes and those heirloom seeds. It depends on what you're doing. Like an heirloom pepper is going to do awesome.
Yeah.
An heirloom tomato will do awesome, probably in a lot of places, but not so much here. There are some that will do well, but a lot of them, like Paul's favorite tomato, he said, is the Brandywine tomato.
That's
But
a
it's
lot of people's favorite.
but it's
yeah.
hit or miss on whether he gets a viable crop out of it because they're just not suited for the environment. So that's where hybridization comes in and can really make a gardener more successful, depending on what they're growing for.
So to follow up a couple times about this, so we're talking about this the burpless cucumber that you were talking
Yeah.
about that comes from Japan and all that, and it's hybrid, and I understand that they're putting two different cultivars together to make this type. Now, if someone buys that seed and then grows that cucumber, can they then harvest the seeds from that, and it will be?
They could, but it will not be if they planted them and it grows, then most likely
It will be like one or the other.
it could be one or the other,
Okay.
or it could be something slightly different.
So it's kind of uncontrolled, right? You
Yeah.
don't really. It's a non-guaranteed genetic almost of what you're happening. Okay,
So that's
that kind of
why-
makes sense.
So
Okay,
those seeds that they make that cross pollination to provide you with that seed,
yeah,
so that you get exactly what you're looking for.
and they're doing all of that. That's a lot of work
And so,
actually. That makes sense.
That's
yeah.
why a lot of times when you go and you only find tomato seeds in most places in packets. Like
Right.
people always come there like, why don't you have bulk tomato seeds? Well, that same packet that you buy at the store of like celebrity
Mm-hmm.
tomatoes that's like $2 or $3, I can buy one that has 1,000 seeds in it for $250 or $300.
Right, and you break it down. Yeah.
And then so that same packet, you're like, wow, that's crazy. Like, so that's why you don't find people buying or selling bigger quantities very often, because it's just so expensive, and the average person can't grasp the cost of some of these seeds.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really grasped it either until you've kind of lined out this process with, someone taking two entire whole crops, which is a lot of work in itself, right? You have this entire crop of cucumbers over here, this entire one, and you have to cross-pollinate them.
Yeah.
And then allow that to go to seed, and then harvest that seed. That is a lot of work, actually.
Yeah.
So some plants are going to be easier work than others. But with a cucumber, I can imagine that'd be a lot of work.
There is one more category of seed when we're talking about types of seed, and like this is often, it's a controversial type of seed, and that's like your GMO, or your genetically modified organism, or your genetically modified seed.
So that I have to ask you about that, because I have a big problem with a lot of these terms, because they're not well defined,
Yeah.
right? And GMO is one of those things that to me is not very well defined. If you're talking about a seed that has been manipulated on the genetic level through individual manipulations, I would call that like bioengineered or something.
I mean, essentially, yeah. So what those are, and to clarify, a genetically modified seed, you're not going to go anywhere around here to a local independent store or a big box store and find a genetically modified seed.
Yeah, but you find
but
the
people-
products of them all the time.
But people ask all the time, clarifying these are not genetically modified. Genetically modified seeds are, I want to say they're regulated, but they're controlled because they're grown for large scale agriculture to help mitigate some of the problems that
Right.
exist.
And
Like,
they're usually copyrighted as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I mean, so one of the common ones is you get corn that is resistant to earworms,
Right.
and that's because it's been genetically modified. I don't know the specifics because I don't research.
Because
I don't
it's
care enough because it
because
doesn't affect me.
that's genetic biology.
Yeah,
It's very, very
but
complicated.
but
Yeah.
it's those things are created in a laboratory to help mitigate certain
Right.
problems that we have as a home gardener, but they're things that we can take care of much simpler than
Yeah.
100-acre field of one crop,
Right.
where
And you come across that when you're monocropping,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
if you have acres and acres and acres of the same crop, if you have the one thing that this crop
yep,
is weak to come through, it's going to be a complete
yeah, it's
blight,
gonna
right?
spread.
So it's
It's like
going
a
to spread.
wildfire. It's gonna
That's why
yeah,
monocropping is dangerous, and that's
yeah,
why we don't monocrop.
yeah.
Right?
So
Well, we
it
don't have
was,
the land to do it either.
but I always want to touch on that because oftentimes people get GMO and hybrid confused.
Yeah, and that was my point. Whereas, like, I have a problem with these words because I feel like they're ill defined.
Yeah.
Because if you've ever seen a picture of what corn originally looked like before human intervention happened, which is genetic modification, right? I'm taking this cultivar and I'm cross pollinating it, and to me, that is genetically modifying a
but
plant.
you're doing it.
But it's not bioengineering a plant,
You're mimicking what nature.
right?
So it could happen in nature, but it would have to happen over and over and over again
Just perfectly, yeah.
to get that variety to become a open pollinator where like that seed produces the
Yeah.
same every single time.
And and I'm going to ask you a question. I know you don't have the answer. It's just going to be an opinion. But why are people so afraid of GMOs? Right? The way you explained it is actually pretty innocuous. It's they probably turned one gene off that it expresses itself for a worm. But
I think one of the things that most people will or get turned off about GMOs because it's the most common they know about is crops that are genetically modified to resist glyphosate, which is
okay.
better known as
Right.
Roundup,
Roundup.
or the traditional weed killer. So there's crops that are being
so they're being genetically modified to withstand toxic chemicals that will enter our body.
yeah, and so
That makes a lot of sense.
that's where people get afraid, and
Yeah.
rightfully so because for me, like growing food, I do it because I can control the variables.
Right.
It's a fun hobby, but at the same time, what I produce tastes better. I know what went into it. I can control as many variables as possible.
Sure, you know what's in the
So
soil.
I think that's why people
yeah.
get scared of a GMO seed.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a grapple?
No,
Do you know what a grapple is?
no.
It's a genetically modified fruit. Okay, a grapple is so apples are really popular with like kind of bioengineering and stuff, and there's almost like a arms race for who can make like the sweetest apple. There's like now there's Galaxy Crisp, Cosmic Crisps, and all that. A grapple, I don't know who did it, but a grapple is literally an apple that has a grape flavor profile. It's so sweet, it's like a grape. And they're very expensive. They usually come in a 4-pack,
That's
right?
how I feel about the cotton candy grapes.
It's
I think
it's
they're terrible.
It's
Like,
really similar. I'm not a big fan of it because I like tart apples,
Yeah.
but I was just
Yeah,
wondering.
same.
So I'm just kind of pointing that out that sometimes people are, genetically modifying or bioengineering. Sometimes just for a goof, right?
Yeah.
Just to change the flavor profile, almost like the same way people want to make glowing shrimps and
trying
fish.
to make the consumer happy.
Yeah. And then speaking about apples, I have another thing that I feel like we need to talk about too. Is although I let my Scotch bonnet, dry out and harvest the seeds of these Scotch bonnets, I would not do that on everything. Typically speaking, there's one thing in my yard that I never save the seeds of, and I have an improved Meyer lemon, right?
Right.
I don't ever save the seeds from that because I know that in one lemon, it might have, let's say, 10 seeds, and each of those 10 seeds are going to produce a totally different lemon, right? So there's really no point to do it, and that's why all of the citrus trees are grafted, right? They're not grown from seeds.
Well, yeah, I mean they're taken from cuttings.
Yeah,
And most of the time they're grafted to a sour orange rootstock.
a rootstock.
So that and it's kind of like hybridization. It's giving you tolerances that
For the root, for the rootstock.
so The Meyer lemon used to be one of the only non-grafted citrus trees, and now there's the improved Meyer
And that's
lemon,
what I have.
and you
Yeah.
see all those being grafted for better cold tolerance,
Right.
and just more hardiness.
And then going back to we're talking about grapes and apples. We'll start with the humble Washington apple. Do you know why the Washington apple is called the Washington apple? So that apple is named after a tree that was found on Old Man Washington's farm.
Okay.
Because every Washington apple that you've ever eaten is a genetically identical thing. They all come from one tree. The tree was grafted, and that tree was grafted, and that tree was grafted, and that tree was grafted.
So it's essentially like you're cloning,
You're
essentially.
cloning,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the thing with apples is when Johnny, and I love to get off on tangents. I think it's one of the best things about having me on the show. But when old, Johnny Appleseed went across the country spreading apple seeds, it's easy for us to imagine that he's doing it to spread delicious apples for prosperity, so everyone would have something to eat all the time. But if you just spread apple seeds, there's no guarantee that any of them are going to taste good. And actually, most apple trees that grow from wild seeds or random seeds taste very bad.
Well, and
They're very sour.
most of those stone fruits like that need they need a cross pollinator.
They need something. Yeah.
So that could change the flavor, the profile really easily.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you that like not all seeds are the same, right? Even though I save my pepper seeds and they basically produce the same delicious pepper every time. It doesn't work with an apple.
And so before we got started today, I mentioned this to you, and I'll bring it up. Some seeds serve no purpose at all.
Okay, yeah.
When we talk about, some people really love their lawn.
Yeah.
Then you find commonly people will come in and they want San Augustine grass seed, and they're like, well, it produces seeds.
I've never seen one, but
It will produce these little stalks, and it looks like they have little teeth on the edge, and those are it's kind of like the seed,
kind of like switchgrass.
Yeah,
looks,
it's
kind of the
but it's on the blade.
Okay.
It's kind of thicker, but they're sterile. They don't produce a viable reproducing seed. So
it's like a mule.
yeah,
It's sterile.
the plant grows and reproduces by stolons and rhizomes. So not every plant produces a seed that in turn reproduces the plant. Now that particular example, there's probably a lot of hybridization in there.
Yeah.
And who knows what else, but it's just something interesting that I always.
It is interesting, and that's kind of what I asked you at the beginning was, does every plant make a seed? And I've never seen a St. Augustine grass seed, but apparently they exist. Talking about that, there's a few plants that I've never seen that produce a seed, and they have to. What about potatoes? Because we just throw a potato in the dirt and it makes another potato, but that thing's got to make a seed, right?
It does. I mean, it flowers. It's in the same family.
I've
as
seen
your
sweet potato
peppers.
vines, right?
Yeah, I mean, it flowers and it can produce seeds, but those seeds are not going to produce the same variety of potato potentially that was, and that's why we grow them through what we call tubers. So what we call a seed potato is a tuber.
It's not a seed.
Yeah, not
Tuber.
a seed.
Yeah.
But we call it that, and that's what we used to grow, because if we did harvest and plant seeds from a potato flower, most likely we're going to get a different cultivar, and that's what's often done for like growers and producers. They can do that to potentially work on and produce
Kind of
new
experiment.
cultivars. Yeah, experiment.
Experiment,
See,
yeah.
maybe find the next best thing.
Huh.
And that's oftentimes what happens with different seed varieties. Just in the 20-something years I've done this, there's certain varieties of corn that were very, very popular, that were always the go-to, that are no longer there, like hybrid sweet corns.
Right.
The number one hybrid sweet corn we sold forever was Merit sweet corn.
Merit?
Yep, Merit.
Yeah, okay.
And it does not exist anymore. It's been replaced by something newer and greater. So the seed world is always changing. I mean, there's so many varieties of so many things out there.
Yeah. I will say this real quick. We're probably getting to the end, but we'll wrap it up. But one of the last times I went to buy seeds was last spring, and I was in M&D, right? And I saw a couple of seeds, and I asked the person in the garden section about it, and it was an older lady, and she had about 14 different conspiracy theories for me. She was like, "You better buy all these seeds right now." I was like, what do you mean?" She's like, "I don't think they're gonna sell seeds next year." I said, "What do you mean?" And she started getting into Monsanto and all this, and she was pretty convinced that there wouldn't be any seeds for sale the next year. Is there any merit to that? Is there a consolidation or a dwindling of seed availability?
Not that I've found. I mean, um, we buy seeds every single year. So um, this is a common problem, that you have as somebody like myself who's a seed seller.
Yeah, yeah.
So unless you retest your seeds, specifically in the state of Texas, every year, we get a bag or you get a small packet of seeds. Those seeds they're stored in that packet. They're open to the air. Over time, there's no guarantee they're going to grow next year. So they have a test date on there. And unless you retest them next year, I can't sell those again.
Huh, okay,
So,
okay.
we have to rebuy our entire seed table every single year because we don't, we can't send that back. We could ask our vendors if
Sure.
they had a lot number and did they retest it, if they had any. But most of the time, that's not available. Even like packet companies, when we're done at the season, what we have left, we turn in a list. They provide us a credit towards next year's seeds, and we donate those to a nonprofit.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Somebody's doing something like a community.
Right.
They can't physically test every lot number that they have because the price of seeds would go up. So it's kind of crazy to think about how many seeds potentially go to waste out there, and that's one of the reasons why every in-person class I have, or like I was telling you
Kinda
about,
give
like
some seeds away?
the giving field doing something.
Yeah.
Those seeds were destined for the trash. So because I legally can't do anything with them, so
Interesting.
providing them back for kids to learn. So
I feel like I'm getting some inside knowledge right
and
now.
my point to this is that like I've yet to come up to a year where like my vendors were like, you better stock up. There's not going to be any
Really?
seeds. Every once in a while, there's like, hey, there's not going to be any of this year. It was
This one particular thing, right?
This one was what they consider a crop failure. It didn't produce
Sure.
enough to go to market, so they probably saved the viable stuff to replant, and better chance next year. Yeah.
So conspiracy busted, right?
I say so.
Okay,
but,
that's good. That's good to know. That's good to know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Well, I mean, I think that's about as much seed talk as I can handle right now. If I go on any longer, I'm going to start losing some of the information that I've gathered.
Yeah, I think one of these days we're gonna circle back to this topic in a sense because I want to ask you questions more about like how you save seeds, and maybe when we get into talking about some preservation of
Okay, yeah.
like dehydrating and
I've got
some things
a bit
that
of
might touch on the culinary world, which you know more
I
about.
do. I have a bit of experience with that, right?
Yeah.
And it's a little folksy too.
But
So
I know we
it's not
didn't talk a lot
science.
about like how to prep and save seeds, but I think that's another day.
That's
another
totally
day,
fine.
another time.
We'll leave this one here. Do you have a sneak peek at what next episode's going to be about?
I think we're going to talk about, because it's, right now it's first week of February.
Mm-hmm.
So around Valentine's Day is potato planting time.
Okay.
So we got to do a little talk about potatoes and those tubers we talked about.
Oh yeah, those tubers.
Those
All right.
tubers.
Well, we're glad you came on by, and we'll see you here next time.
Later.